Please, it's a pleasure to meet again. Mudar Zahran came from London to visit us. Mudar, as you know, is living in London for the last couple of years after he had to leave Jordan. And you may read his articles at Jerusalem Post and other places. And we would like to hear from you your ideas about the current situation vis-a-vis the idea of declaring or identifying Jordan as the national state or national homeland for the Palestinians. Please.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's much, much appreciated, and it's always the dilemma that, you know, we so-called Palestinians or Arabs, the only place where we were able to talk and express our minds are with the Jewish enemy. So in that concept, it's very interesting where Israel stands today. Basically, if you look around with what's happening in Gaza, most people are very pessimistic. You know, with the youngsters getting killed in Gaza, with Hamas shooting everywhere, and ISIS in Jordan, most people tend to be pessimistic. But to be honest with you, I think Israel has never been in a better strategic situation than it is today. Can you hear me?
I actually would think the opposite. Would you please explain why?
Israel now has, who were Israel's strongest enemies? Historically, it's been the arch enemies have been us, the Palestinians, and the genuine enemies, which could actually execute a threat, were Egypt, Syria, and Iraq, and Iran, since Mr. Khomeini came into power. Today, the way we look at it, where is Syria? Syria's gone. Syria will never, ever be able to redeem itself from the civil war it has broken out. And Syria is just a bomb. Everyone knew that the Syrian regime was a bomb waiting to happen. An Alawite minority controlling 22 million people. It's not going to stay forever. So basically, I doubt the Syrian rebels will ever be able to defeat Assad, and the Assad will ever be able to defeat the Syrian rebels. Syria will become another Afghanistan, and this current situation is going to stay for a very long time. Now, before I elaborate on Syria, and I'm going to get back to all of them later, Syria is gone, Iraq is gone, and now Iraq is balanced with ISIS. We had a Shiite government, which is very radical, has incredible wealth of oil, which is controlled by Iran completely, and I have served through the US Department of State in Iraq and Jordan, and I know what's really happening. And it was a very stronghold to Iran. And it was actually a threat to Israel, because at one point, believe it or not, Iraq was trying to buy 100 F-16s airplanes. And now, where's Iraq? It's barely keeping its own grounds against ISIS, the Islamic State. Now, who's left? We have Iran. Iran could barely protect itself or its fronts in Iran, in Iraq, and Syria, and now in Lebanon. With Lebanon also being engulfed into this, how many fronts can Hezbollah fight? Can Hezbollah fight in Lebanon and against Israel and in Syria too? So now we have a very balanced equation of the Shiite radicals and the Sunni radicals. And one of my enlightening professors, one of my enlightening teachers, which I've used his work in my PhD work, was Daniel Pipes. He said it long time ago, let them finish one another. Let them do one another. The balance would never be able to be broken. And all of Israel's arch enemies and traditional enemies have disappeared. Could the people surrounding Israel do 1973 Yom Kippur War again? Could they even do 1967? Could they even do 1948? No. Now, who's left in this equation? Egypt. Egypt, you know, there is a serendipity of the situation. We had a wonderful leader in Egypt, Mubarak, with all his flaws. He's a dictator, no human rights. He was very bad to my people, the Palestinians. But on the other hand, Mr. Mubarak was very supportive. He took the Palestinian cause as one of his, chess pawns, which he could play very well. Sometimes he opens the tunnels with Gaza. Sometimes he shuts the tunnels with Gaza. Sometimes he fights some Hamas elements. Sometimes he doesn't fight them. He was playing with Israel, and it was giving him a lot of strength to be the security exhaust for Hamas and Gaza. Now Mubarak is gone. We had one bad year with the Muslim Brotherhood, and this came back. I think it's God's work, to be honest. Came back with the Muslim Brotherhood losing their first victory, their first political victory in history. They controlled the biggest Arab country, and they lost badly. And now, what we can see is Mr. Sisi. He is more in need. I love the man, Mr. Sisi, but he is more in need of American and Israeli support than Mr. Mubarak. So that's why now Egypt has become a comfort zone instead of a potential rival. Now, how does all of this filter? Now we have one point which I'm not sure many people can actually argue against it, that Israel's traditional enemies are gone. Israel has threats. ISIS is at the gate. But those ISIS people are busy fighting the Shiite, and they're going to be fighting the Shiite for the next 15 years or 20 years before they get to Israel. It's horrifying what they're doing, killing the Christians. For example, one day they killed 300 Sunni imams in one day in Mosul. I have the piece of documentation for that. They rounded them up because they won't give in to ISIS, and they killed them. They are too moderate for them. But on the other hand, when will they have the time to fight Israel? It's going to be a long time before that happens. And even by then, they're going to be finished off through one another. With that being the case, where does Israel stand today? Israel stands with less alarming but more serious threats. Israel stands in a situation where the threats that Israel faces is not as imposing as other threats you traditionally have. For example, people, if you tell them today about ISIS, even people of the establishment, of the cabinet, they would love to listen what you have to say about ISIS. If you tell them about, for example, Israel's demographic future, it's nothing they're interested to hear about. It's not alarming. I think Israel now has to think strategic for the good of my people, because historically we know the curve. Each time Israel did well, we the Palestinians did very well. Each time Israel does bad, like now, we're doing bad. There's no question about that. So my people in Jerusalem and Bethlehem and elsewhere, because Israel now is fighting Hamas, there's no tourism. Taxi drivers are just sitting and watching one another. While in another situation, I'm preaching to the choir, we only did well when Israel does well. And it's in my people's interest, in a political leadership that I assume that Israel does well. It's in my people's interest. Therefore, Israel today has the situation in Gaza. What's the situation in Gaza? Few people understand what's really happening in Gaza, including possibly even the army commanders fighting on the ground. What do you have? You think you have Hamas, she was provoking you all that time after the 3 teenagers were kidnapped, and eventually they had to deal with Hamas. Most people understand that. They don't understand that this war in Gaza is about the most strategic war Israel has had, possibly since 1982. The war in Gaza is not a war between Israel and Hamas. The war in Gaza is a war between Israel and Hamas, Qatar, and who supports Qatar? The new liberals of the Obama administration. And who supports Hamas? Now I have a surprise for you. King of Jordan. Who controls Hamas? Who owns Hamas? Hamas is not a government or a movement. Hamas is a military wing controlled by the International Muslim Brotherhood. Who controls the Muslim Brotherhood? The International Office of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are as organized and as controlled as the Israeli army. They have a hierarchy. You cannot move. Khalid Mish'al of Hamas has people controlling him. He cannot say anything. If he does against him, they'll kill him, if necessary. Who controls Hamas? Muslim Brotherhood. Who controls the Muslim Brotherhood? Hammam Saeed, Professor Hammam Saeed, PhD in English literature, and he lives in Jordan. Hammam Saeed is a Palestinian Jordanian, and he is personal friend with the King of Jordan. And the Muslim Brotherhood with Jordan controls Hamas, and the three most important people in the Muslim Brotherhood, two of them are Jordanians living in Jordan. So the international command of the Muslim Brotherhood is in Jordan. And who controls the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan? The Jordanian intelligence. There's enough documentation, my work, as much as the leaked WikiLeaks cables, as much as any expert in Jordan who can tell you, the Muslim Brotherhood of Jordan is not against the king. They are working with the king. In November 2012, when we stood, and I personally, with a group of people, we launched the biggest revolution in Jordan's history. Actually, the only one. We never had a revolution in Jordan. 500,000 people took to the streets, mostly Palestinians, peacefully, and we ordered them. Then when Israel's operation started at the same day against Gaza, back in 2012, we told them, don't chant anything against Israel, because our enemy now is not Israel. Our enemy is the Haashmites. And they listened to us. Not a single protest against Israel. And I'm proud of that on record, because my people are waking up. At least they're following a leader who's different. To make a long story short, who in that time, who stood up and said, we will never allow for the king to fall? The Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood went on television, and this is documented. This is not hocus pocus. Please, we are all academics here. The Muslim Brotherhood said on record, we will never allow for the king of Jordan to fall. And then they launched counter protests, and they physically attacked, sometimes with weapons, anyone protesting against the king. And even after that, they kept supporting the king, and long trail of evidence that the Muslim Brotherhood is under the king's control. And as a result, just in the Atlantic magazine, there was an interview that the King of Jordan had with the Atlantic magazine. In it, he openly admits a connection to the Muslim Brotherhood, and he says our margin of distrust is only 10%. So you agree with 90%, Mr. King, of what the Muslim Brotherhood says. That said, today the war in Gaza is led by two countries, Jordan and Qatar. Qatar follows Mr. Obama. Mr. Obama is not happy with the fact that you rejected the peace agreement which he has worked very hard for. And now here's a piece of information for you. Who suggested the peace proposal to Mr. Obama? Who gave him the idea? King of Jordan. It was documented by Idiot Akhranot, and it was documented by Al-Quds Al-Arabi newspaper of London. King of Jordan is the one who suggested that Israel should go back to 1967 and he should control Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank. And Mr. Obama went for it. So now we have to be punished for refusing that. And that's why the King of Jordan is launching Khalid Mish'al to order Hamas to fight you to the end. When the ceasefire talks took place, it's very complicated. They need to do two things. One, to teach Israel a very hard lesson, which maybe President Obama is not for it. He doesn't support terrorists, I assume, but he's not exactly, if he sees Israel learning a hard lesson, I think President Obama's attitude would be, I told you so, you deserve it. Maybe not in that fashion, but at least I can't see the US administration very unhappy with what's happening. At the same time, they want to teach Mr. Sisi a lesson. King of Jordan is anti Mr. Sisi. He is against Mr. Sisi. And there was an Al-Quds Al-Arabi report which says that Sisi was, quote unquote, not eager to deal with the King of Jordan because he is supportive of the Muslim Brotherhood. Which very few, you won't see this in the Israeli media. There was one article about this only. And he has an arch enemy in Egypt, for him, both him and Qatar, which is Sisi. That's why if they make Hamas go out of control and Sisi is unable to do anything, it would make Sisi look as a lambing duck, useless. That's why this war would not stop anytime easily or with any easy fashion. That's why this war is strategic, because now Israel has the potential to actually, and you will see that there will be eventually, sooner or later, today, tomorrow, 20 years from now, I don't know, eventually this war is going to lead to an Egyptian involvement in Gaza, which is basically going back to the original basics, which is Judea and Samaria, or the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, should go under Jordan's responsibility, and the Palestinians in Gaza should go under Egypt's responsibility. Right now, I think we should promote and seek an Egyptian involvement in Gaza. Very few of you have followed the news when just a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, an unknown terrorist group killed 22 Egyptian soldiers on the borders. Then President Sisi came out and said there's going to be a price to pay. Show me who has an interest in killing 22 Egyptian soldiers on the borders other than Hamas. Can you think of anyone? I personally can't, and if it's not Hamas, it's the Muslim Brotherhood. And why on the borders? Eventually Egypt will find a reason to get involved in Gaza, and if they don't find one, they'll create one, don't worry. With that being the case, I think we should support Egypt's role to A, protect the Palestinians in Gaza, and B, provide to the Palestinians in Gaza. We cannot protect them with Hamas launching rockets from their schools, from their mosques. Israeli army is not the sweetest army in the world, but what can they do when their towns are being launched from inside mosques? Do they have to sit and watch? Would any army, would the US Army sit and watch? They have to react. So it's self-defense that's very morally expensive for Israel. And this is where Mr. Sisi could come into place. Initially, we should possibly, even if this war calms down, and I don't think it will easily, we should possibly seek an Egyptian sort of guarantors or peace control guarantors between Gaza and Israel, between Ashkelon and Gaza. And that could only undermine Hamas, but this is a much bigger situation than Gaza. Eventually, if Jordan's king doesn't have the last word, him and Qatar in Gaza, if they don't have the last word, it's going to spill directly into Jordan. Today, King of Jordan, I was yesterday warning on Twitter that the King of Jordan is with Hamas, and everyone is telling me, are you crazy? And today you should hear the comments of the King of Jordan. He's calling Israel that we should hold Israel responsible in court. You might say it's normal for Israel allies to go out and say things against Israel. Not this time. The king always would criticize Israel, but this time you can tell he's worried, he's afraid. He doesn't want Israel to win this war in Gaza. He doesn't want Sisi to bring a ceasefire in Gaza. He doesn't want any of that. And he controls the cards. Qatar finances. He controls the Muslim Brotherhood. All top leaders of Hamas are in Amman, and the children of Ismail Haniyeh are in Amman at Amman Private University. It's called Amman Private University, driving around under protection from the Royal Guards of Jordan. And I dare Jordan and Hamas to deny this. It's his game. If there is a victory in Gaza, or any good outcomes in Gaza against Hamas and him, is going to spill to him directly. Now, to conclude, where does the king stand? Usually the historical idea is, this is Israel's concept. Why do the Palestinians not have a country as of now? Because, you know the situation. We had an agreement with Israel, with Jews. We split the country. Palestinian Jews took this land, 22%. and Arab or non-Jews Palestinians took Jordan. This was the agreement. We all know history. Why didn't it happen? Because the king of Jordan and the kings of Jordan are telling us, as of today, until today, that we are refugees who should go back to Palestine. And the media of the king of Jordan, this war especially, has been completely against Israel. Yesterday, on Friday, the other day I mean, the media called for major protests against Israel, against the Israeli embassy. Amman was empty. The Palestinians in Amman didn't join. Not because they love Israel, because they know the king's games. But the question, Israel knows all the problems with the king. Israel doesn't need the king to protect the borders, because Israel has a very strong army. Also, who protects the borders? The Jordanian army, not the king. The Jordanian army is not under the king's control. If you're talking about King Hussein, yeah. But this is a new king. The CIA has taken over, and the Defense Intelligence Agency, many of you may not know it exists. The Defense Intelligence Agency of the United States is in full control of the Jordanian army and the Jordanian Air Force. So the king, if Khalid Mish'al becomes Jordan's president tomorrow, he cannot move the army against Israel. And if Jordan blows up and burns tomorrow, the borders will still be secure, because we have 12,500 American soldiers in Jordan, and around 2,000 of them in Bakura borders with Israel. And we have the Jordanian army fully under America's control. America has issues with this administration has issues with Israel, but America can never become Israel's enemy. It cannot afford to, and it should not. And the Congress, any president who would do that, the Congress would eat him alive. So there's no worries about the borders, but still, the Israeli strategic concept is the Palestinians are a rogue element. Whenever we give them something, they go against us 10 times fold. So we have to keep them under control. They know that the king has no military power. The Mossad knows that the king is not keeping the borders safe. It's the army that does. They know he has no say. But at least from the strategic point of view of Israel, he's keeping us, the Palestinians, under control. So we won't come out and do something. This theory has worked in the past very well, but not today. My question to you, would the war in Gaza be the same today if those Gazans were able to go as refugees back to their country, Jordan? Would we have the same thing? I bet not. Would Hamas be able to claim, sovereignty over Gaza when there is a Palestinian president in Amman who represents all the Palestinians? I am saying Israel has been thinking tactical and technical. Most of the Israeli administration members are former soldiers. Soldiers, they don't think strategic. Soldiers think, I look at the borders of Jordan and I don't see anyone firing rockets. That's it. I don't care what happens next. This is where people like you come, where you think strategic. People say, okay, most of the babies born in Israel today are Jewish. True. But demographic-wise, when in 20 years, say the Palestinians become 7 million, are you going to keep saying we can keep the situation as is, where is, nothing's going to change? 5 years ago, I was telling people we need a country for the Palestinians before it's going to cost both of us dearly. And people like Ira Eldad were saying the same. And people were shunning them as the crazy man in the Knesset. And eventually, look what we have today. Naftali Bennett is saying give them the Israeli citizenship. David Rubin, right-winger, crazy settler, friend of mine, saying give them the Israeli citizenship. And Hotevli, Tzipi Hotevli is saying give them the Israeli citizenship. So they're going to become eventually the one-state solution. It's going to enforce itself if the situation remains 10, 20 years, which is fine with us. It's going to be very good for us, by the way. But how is it going to keep Israel Jewish? I think you have to call things by its own name. We have 56 Muslim countries in the world who do not blink, and I am an Orthodox practicing praying Muslim. 56 countries in the world claim to be Muslim. Why cannot there be one Jewish state? Just one. unless Israel becomes Jewish, and I mean Jewish as in all Jewish, with full sovereignty, and unless Jordan becomes Palestinian, there are many more Gaza wars that are ahead of our times. And basically, the administration of Israel today is in a good position because of what I've just mentioned, the disappearance of the traditional, conventional threats. They think that they can keep the situation as is and basically pass the burden and the trouble down to the next generations, which is not fair. Same goes for our so-called leadership. They want to do the same. And this is where I, as someone in a leadership capacity, dare to say no. I'm not going to do that. I'm not and never will call for the transfer or the deportation of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. Nonetheless, there will be residents of Israel. And here are not citizens of Israel. All of them already hold, in case you didn't know, all of them, every single Palestinian in Judea and Samaria holds a Jordanian passport. I don't know, maybe not too many people know that. Every single one, not some of them, every one. They travel on Jordanian passport. And eventually, all we're going to do is give them full rights and employment in Jordan. And we're going to keep them where they are if they wish. And they can move if they like. They can move. If we create a prosperous Jordan. Also, what kind of Jordan we are talking about? Are we talking about a powerful Jordan, a strong Jordan, a weak Jordan? What are we talking about? The new Jordan I'm talking about is a welfare state that's demilitarized, that's economically thriving, and just like Judea and Samaria, economically connected to Israel. This way we're going to guarantee that the future of my generations to come will be a much better future. In addition, Jordan's king spends 52% of the budget on the army. When was the last time Jordan's army fought at all? And look today, for those ignorants who keep saying, oh, we need Jordan because it protects the borders. It's a buffer zone. Jordan, when the minute ISIS showed up at the borders, they called for Israel's protection. So if Jordan's king is not keeping the country stable, by the way, the media does not report anything on Jordan. Jordan is burning. The south, Ma'an, is like Gaza. We have at least one soldier killed every day. We have had 60 soldiers killed in Ma'an. That's less than what you had in Gaza. Those people dying, it's not reported by the media. You know why? Who reports mainly about the media? Al Jazeera, Qatar. Who is Qatar in bed with? King of Jordan. When Protective Edge started, you know what Qatar did? They took a known pro-king loyalist and put him as manager of Al Jazeera, Yasser Abu Hilala, who is very anti-Semitic and known to support the King of Jordan. It's like telling the King of Jordan, we are all yours at Al Jazeera. We put one of your people to run it. And Al Jazeera has been launching incredibly against Israel, which shows you how difficult it is for Israel or the Israeli common sense to kick in and call the King of Jordan an enemy, not a friend. He's not like his father, someone who's trying to survive, someone who's in between. This king is an enemy. And I want to say this on record. I hope this goes on YouTube. This is the first time I'm saying this. First time ever. In October 2009, I was having coffee with one of the king's most personal friends, who has served at one of the top 3 jobs in the Jordanian government. One of the highest top 3. And I was talking about Israel and why Jordan is withdrawing passports from the Palestinians and asking them to go home. When actually they don't go home, they keep them in the country, but they tell them you don't have a passport anymore. And he told me, you know what? I'm going to say it in Arabic. Anyone speaks Arabic here? He said, just for the record, سيدنا شكله بحبش اليهود. Our master, the king, he doesn't like Jews. I told him, laughing, so is he an anti-Semite? He shook his head and laughed. He said, بيطيقش إشي اسمه يهود. He can't stand anything called Jews. If you look at his behavior, don't care for what I say, what he does, you will probably have things starting to kick in and feel exactly what that gentleman's doing. That being the case, strategic-wise, it's in Israel's best interest to establish a Palestinian state, even en masse. The fundamental issues are not going to go away. There's always going to be the rhetoric of Palestinians, oppressed Palestinians by the evil Zionists. We need to end that and don't depend on the vote of the people. I love my people. I have evidence that they are against the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan. Not because they love Israel, but for the same reason Gazans today are against the Hamas. Because they have suffered because of the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan. So there is a very likelihood that a secular could take over Jordan. And at the end of the day, we're not asking Israel to do anything. We're asking Israel to stop supporting the king in both the US and elsewhere. In 2012, the king almost fell down, and Israel brought him back. All you have to do is just let go. Don't do anything. We'll do our job. We know what we're doing. We're not like the seculars of Egypt. Seculars of Egypt has 65% illiteracy. People voted on just a photo. They couldn't run. And whom they're going to vote for? Someone with a beard. Jordan is different. And Jordan, even the statistics of Jordan prove that they are different. No, they don't love Jews, but they hate the Muslim Brotherhood, which is it's supportive of the king much more than they hate Jews. All we need to do is just the Egyptian model. We need to bring the goodwill of one powerful leader, just like Sisi. And that's going to walk us out of this whole mess. And here allow me to warn and conclude. Some people believe all we have to do is keep the situation as is. Many people, especially in the IDF and the Mossad and Shin Bet, they think if we keep the situation as is, if it's not broken, don't fix it, keep it the way it is. That's not how strategy works. I hope there's going to be a good outcome from the war in Gaza to save Gaza and Israeli civilians and the young Israeli men fighting at the borders for no good cause because of Hamas. And inshallah, there's going to be peace in our time. To conclude, last year I was invited to a conference and I said I did not believe the King of Jordan was going to make it. And in September last year, when Obama was saying he was going to attack Assad, the entire Hashemite family left Jordan. And they only came back 1 week after Obama said he was not going to hit. So Jordan was Hashemite free for 3 weeks. The King of Jordan is fragile, and even those who choose to love him and worship him and cheerlead for him, I know many names, don't bet so much on him that he's going to stick around for too long. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mudar. Thank you for this brilliant assessment of the situation. I'll take privilege to ask the first question. I can fully agree with you on your analysis about Jordan. One of my recent articles in הערב was "Don't Save the King." But I wonder about something you suggest about Gaza and Egypt. It was an axioma in Israel right from the beginning, from 1948, that we shouldn't allow Egyptian army almost in a range of a 1-day walk from Gaza to Tel Aviv, because we had a very bitter experience in 48 that they almost were able to invade the heartland of Israel from Gaza. Now, we left Sinai Peninsula after Camp David agreement and with the peace agreement with Egypt, and maybe the only last achievement of the 6 Days War was the fact that the Egyptian army is no longer in Gaza Strip and no longer in a jump range from the center of Israel. What you actually suggest is that we should wish that the Egyptian government will take over Gaza, and they will be in the ability to put the military inside Gaza Strip in order to control the Palestinians. Now we may be very satisfied with the policy of Mr. Sisi, but who promised us who will replace him? And is it the long-range strategy of Egypt to rely upon peace agreement with Israel?
I think I did not make myself clear. I was never talking about the Egyptian army or the Egypt taking over Gaza. I think actually it's a bad idea. I was talking about the Egyptian army, I'm going to say again, getting involved in defending and protecting the civilians in Gaza against Hamas and providing to the civilians in Gaza against Hamas. And when the job is finished, okay, there could be many options for Gaza. One of them is, a local city hall self-rule, which I've heard that from Muhammad Saada, a Palestinian journalist who was just on Fox News. He said, we don't want Hamas, we don't want Fatah, we want to rule ourselves. I think city halls, the Mardechai Kedar concept, is the most proper concept for all Palestinian major towns. There are 8 major towns in Judea and Samaria, and 1 in Gaza. I think they need a city hall, and nobody with a gun will be other than Israelis. I am a Palestinian, I love my people, but I want the bloodshed to stop for my people, and unfortunately, we can only depend on guns being with Israelis to make sure that at least we don't kill one another, like Hamas butchered Fatah people. So